So let's explore this really provocative question. What if science itself, the whole thing, actually rests on a foundation of faith?
All right, let's really get into this. Imagine for a second that the entire scientific enterprise, we're talking everything from biology to physics, is built on something it literally can't prove. And no, I'm not talking about religious dogma. I'm talking about a set of core beliefs you just have to accept before you can even start a single experiment. So let's pull back the curtain on this hidden foundation. We're going to look at you could say, articles of faith that science depends on, day in and day out.
We usually think of science as the complete opposite of belief, right? It's all about evidence, hard proof, stuff you can repeat. But, and this is what's so fascinating, underneath all of that, there are some huge assumptions being made. And here they are. They sound simple, but they are absolutely massive ideas. First, this belief that the universe isn't just chaos, that it's orderly and actually follows laws. Second, that those laws don't just change on a whim. They're consistent everywhere and always. And third, and this is a big one, that our brains, our little human minds, can actually understand these incredibly deep cosmic rules.
Okay, and this is the real kicker. You can't use science to prove any of this. Why not? Because the scientific method itself assumes all those things are true before it even gets started. It's the ultimate chicken and egg situation. To do science, you have to first have faith that these principles are true.
I mean, look, we all know science works. We've got smartphones in our pockets, life-saving vaccines, rockets heading to space. That's not the debate. The deeper question, the one that really makes you think, is why? Why on earth do we live in a universe that's so incredibly orderly, and even more amazingly, one that we can actually understand? Okay, so let's tackle that first big assumption, this expectation of order. I mean, where did the first scientists even get the wild idea that they should be looking for universal laws in the first place?
Well, the writer C.S. Lewis had this really brilliant take on it. He basically argued that the pioneers of science, the people who started it all, weren't just stumbling around in the dark hoping to find a pattern. No, they had a specific reason to expect to find them. They looked for laws in nature because they believed there was a lawgiver, a great mind who wrote those laws into the fabric of reality. This is what you could call the lawgiver premise. It's this core idea that the incredible order and predictability we see all around us isn't some crazy coincidence. Instead, it's the signature of a rational creator. It just makes sense, right? An orderly mind would create an orderly universe. It's a really simple but incredibly powerful explanation for why nature works the way it does. But now, let's just try taking that lawgiver out of the picture. If the universe is just the result of a random, chaotic, cosmic accident, then why in the world would we expect it to be governed by these elegant, universal mathematical laws? Suddenly, without that foundation, the very order that science depends on becomes this huge, baffling mystery. All right, so we've talked about the order out there in the cosmos. But what about the order in here, inside our own heads? This leads us straight to that other massive assumption, that we can actually trust our own minds to figure any of this out. I mean, really think about this. If our brains are just the product of evolution, of natural selection, then their only real job is to help us survive, right? Find a meal, not become a meal, make more of us. But why would a brain that's fine-tuned for survival on the savannah also be weirdly good at discovering things like quantum mechanics or general relativity? There's just no survival advantage there. And this is exactly where the philosopher Alvin Plantinga steps in. He makes this really compelling case that there's a deep conflict, as he puts it, between a purely naturalistic view of the world and trusting our own ability to reason. His point is, if our minds are just an accident of unguided evolution, then we actually have a pretty good reason to doubt if they're aimed at truth at all. And this slide just lays it out perfectly. On the one hand, you have the theism. If we were made in the image of a rational creator, it makes total sense that our minds would be built to find truth. Plantinga calls this a deep concord. Everything fits. But then you have naturalism. Our minds are just built for survival. And that creates what he calls a defeater. Basically, it's a reason to doubt all of our conclusions, including the conclusion that naturalism is true. It kind of undermines itself. So when you boil it all down, science seems to be holding on to two huge articles of faith. First, faith that the universe is orderly. And second, faith that our minds can actually understand that order. And again, neither of these can be proven by science itself. Okay, so if science is resting on these two giant unprovable assumptions,
Is there a worldview out there that actually makes sense of them? A framework that explains why science is so successful? Well, let's walk through this logic here. Step 1. If you start with the idea that a rational, intelligent mind created the universe, then of course it would be orderly. That's exactly what you'd expect. And step 2, if our minds were also shaped by that same mind, then of course we'd be able to understand the universe. It all just clicks into place. You have two big mysteries and one single coherent explanation. And just like that, the whole foundation of science isn't just floating out there anymore, based on these assumptions we just have to cross our fingers and hope are true. Instead, it becomes anchored. It's grounded in a reality that is rational and understandable from the ground up.
This reminds me of a fantastic metaphor from one of the absolute giants of physics, Werner Heisenberg, one of the pioneers of quantum mechanics.
Heisenberg had this great line. He said that the first gulp from the glass of science, that first taste where you start learning about natural laws and mechanisms, it can easily turn you into an atheist. It feels like science is explaining everything, leaving no room for God. But then he delivers the punchline. He says, but at the bottom of the glass, God is waiting. His point was that as you go deeper, when you get past the surface level stuff and really dig into the fundamental nature of reality, you don't find chaos. You find something else entirely. And that's really the heart of Heisenberg's idea. The more we learn about the universe, the less it looks like some random, chaotic accident. Seriously, from the fine-tuned structure of a single atom to the mind-bending expansion of the cosmos, what we find is breathtaking precision and unbelievable order. We don't find chaos. We find a cosmos. So this all leads to a final, really pointed question that kind of ties everything together. If you truly believe that your mind, the very thing you're using to think right now, is just the end product of meaningless, random chemical reactions, then why should you trust any of its conclusions, especially a big one like that? It's like sawing off the very branch you're sitting on. So what's the big takeaway here? It's that science isn't the enemy of a belief in a creator. Actually, in a really profound way, it kind of depends on it. The incredible success of science is in itself powerful evidence that we live in a universe that is rational, orderly, and understandable, which, when you think about it, is exactly the kind of world you'd expect a rational God to create.